Hi guys, welcome back to our channel and welcome to our spooky Halloween episode.
Welcome back.
Today, Kathy is going to be telling us a spooky story, so buckle in. Go get your Halloween treats and buckle in, baby.
Yep. Okay, hello everybody. I'm Beetlejuice. Today I'm going to be covering the story of the DeFeo murders and the Amityville Horror House.
Ooh.
And as you know, I am not the paranormal or the true crime girl. So this was a new thing for me. And one thing that I've learned throughout my research is that there are two very opposing sides that think two very different things happened there and afterwards and stuff. So let's get into it.
Hey! I'm excited to hear this and all you think about this. I know about the case a little bit, but I've never done a deep dive or anything.
Yeah.
Yay!
I'm excited. So the story starts on November 13th, 1974, when 23-year-old Ronnie Butch DeFeo allegedly got up in the middle of the night and killed his entire family. Yeah, so he shot and killed his parents, Louise and Ronald, aka Big Ronnie DeFeo, and his four siblings, Dawn, who was 18, Allison, who was 13, Mark, who was 12, and John Matthew, who was 9. Allegedly, he started in his parents' room in the master bed and then went to his little brother's room and then to his little sister's room and then finally to Dawn's room in the 3rd floor.
Whoa.
The initial confession had a ton of gaps in it, and so it caused people to have a lot of theories. But what's important to know is that these kids were very, very loved by the community. The mom was. These kids were really, really loved, and I think that throughout all of this, they, as we've seen before in true crime, that has gotten away from everything, just the actual people that died in this, so. Yeah, but a lot of people came to the funeral. There was a procession, a ton of people came. It was sad because there was 6 coffins there. And more than 1,000 people showed up to the funeral at the St. Martin's Catholic Church. Wow. And the church was across the street from the kids' Catholic school that they went to, the 3 younger kids. And so when they were carrying them out to the hearses, there were kids there watching that were mates and stuff,
Oh, wow.
And so they were laid to rest in Farmingdale at St. Charles Catholic Cemetery. And so initially taking a look at the family, super Catholic. There was statues outside of Catholic stuff, very religious. Butch, he was very loved by his siblings and his mother. And taking a look at the family, outwardly, they were super Catholic. There were statues outside of Catholic saints and stuff, And Butch, he loved his siblings and his mom. And his only real beef was with his dad, Big Ronnie. Now, Ronald DeFeo Sr., he was born on November 16, 1930. And Louise Marie, his wife, was born on November 3rd, 1931. And the two met in high school. They became high school sweethearts. And Ronnie worked at a car dealership, his father-in-law's car dealership, and he was abusive from the get. He was a piece of work, man. They had their oldest and first child, which was Butch, and he was born on November 26, 1951. When Butch was a kid, Big Ronnie would push him around, and he was intense with Louise, and eventually Louise decided to leave him because she was I hate you, she was gorgeous, she was young, and she was I'm gonna leave you, you're not treating me right.
Oh, good for her.
Yeah, but then he wrote her a song, and he was I'm so sorry, I miss you so much, I'm gonna change. And she was damn. And so she forgave him and she took him back.
Oh.
Unfortunately, yeah. And a lot of people were aware of this. This wasn't a secret. A lot of people knew that he was super abusive. And a lot of people knew that Butch didn't like his dad because his dad was abusive to every single family member. But yeah, so she eventually, she decided to go back with him. And in early 1965, they found out that they were pregnant with John Matthew. And so they were oh my gosh, we need a bigger house. So that is when they moved to 1112 Ocean Avenue. And that is what became the Amityville Horror House. I know. Big Ronnie made this huge wooden sign that said High Hopes on it, and he hung it up in front of the house. And some people think that it was I don't know, a narcissistic way of him being playing out a fantasy of him moving to a new house and all of a sudden being a better person, not being abusive kind of thing.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's crazy because some people suspect that if Ronnie wasn't such a piece of crap, abusive, if he wasn't so abusive, then maybe the murders never would have happened,
Yeah.
Which is wild.
Oh,
But yeah, Butch told his lawyer that what happened was he had taken some drugs and he was watching a TV show called Castle Keep, which is like this violent World War II show. And side note, some speculate that this is like what triggered it because he took drugs and then because he was watching like a war show. Some people think that maybe that triggered his brain. Maybe, I don't know. But he said that he was watching the show when he heard his family in the other room and they were talking. They were like conspiring to kill him. And so from there he was like, oh my gosh. And then after that, a hooded woman with black hands and a black hood came over and handed him a rifle. And then that's when he murdered everybody. And the lawyer, Weber, said that he would be smirking when he was telling the story, so he didn't know if he was like being serious. Yeah.
Ooh.
Can you pump me some water on this, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
So more than 12 hours after the murders, which like what was he doing that long, you know? But more than 12 hours after, Butch ran into Henry's bar, which was a local dive bar in the area, and he told them that he had just found his parents shot and killed, and he convinced a couple of patrons to go back to his house and check out what happened. And one of the patrons there was Bobby Kelsky, who was a friend, and he was like super distraught. Like, imagine if somebody just one of your friends or local people came in, they're like, oh my god, something happened to my diaphragm. Like, of course you would go back, you know? I mean, maybe, yeah. I don't know if I would, you know?
Yeah, if it was somebody I liked and trusted and was concerned about, yeah,
exactly. So everybody gets in the car and they go and they see what happened and they call 911, and the Suffolk County Homicide Squad led the investigation. And so some of the cops or some of the detectives down there were interviewing everyone. The official choice became that Rodney would be safer if they took him into the police department. So they did. They took him over to there. That's when the questioning continued. And the next morning, they woke him up, they handcuffed him, and they booked him. And this was all over the news.
Whoa.
Yeah. Some observations about this. Each person was shot with a .35 Marlin gun, but nobody reported, like according to the police report, nobody tried getting up, nobody tried fighting back. And the district attorney did a noise level experiment, and the gun can be heard like 4 to 5 blocks away. The sound was never reported, and also on the police report it doesn't show any attempts of fighting back or anything, allegedly. And there's no drugs found in their system. And so right off the bat there's like a huge speculation for like maybe an accomplice.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's creepy considering he said that a woman gave him the gun.
Yeah.
What?
There's this guy named Herman Reyes who's a criminologist that was hired by the defense, and he told the judge that some of the bodies were moved and that multiple weapons were used. But again, per the police report, no other weapon was ever found and the bodies were not moved according to the report. So it's kind of hard to know, you know, because
yeah.
The defense's theory was saying that Don and Butch hated their parents a lot and they had been conspiring to kill them. And that the night of, Butch couldn't do it, so Don killed the parents and then also the kids, and so Butch freaked out and killed her in return. So initially they were saying that he only killed Don. I don't know when they changed it to charging him with all 6 murders. I don't know when that happened. One of the first things that pointed to Butch was the fact that there were 2 empty rifle boxes, and the murder weapon was a rifle, and the 2 boxes were in his room. And so after that, everything kind of started pointing towards him. And as detectives interrogated him, the story would change so many times. Like one time he said that Tony Mateo, who was a mob guy, him and his guys woke him up and killed his whole family in front of him. And he stuck to this story for a while, but then his story changed and he said that he and Don, along with 2 other friends, Bobby Kelsky and some dude named Augie, that they conspired to commit the murders together, and that's what happened that night. And so, yeah, and then he ended up admitting to all of the murders.
What?
Yeah, he changed his story so many times.
I wonder why. I wonder if he just was mentally unwell or what.
I wonder why as well.
Huh.
They looked for the murder weapon everywhere and they could not find it. Yeah, it's crazy because like it was evident that a lot of people could see Butch hurting Big Ronnie, but not the kids, you know? And so a lot of people believe that maybe Dawn did it, and maybe that is what happened, where maybe she killed the parents that night and maybe killed the kids to not have a accomplices. And maybe Butch that night like freaked out and was like, oh my god, why did you kill the kids? And then he killed Dawn.
Whoa.
Some people think that happened. And then also it's like, out of 6 people, like how can one person kill 6 people? One of them being 275 pounds. But Ronnie weighed 175 pounds. So how could he have killed 6 people and one of them being 100 pounds more than him? You know? Like,
yeah, without like sustaining any additional injuries.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, potentially getting in a fight, causing an additional disruption. Like, that's wild.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
As you can imagine, a lot of people have a lot of thoughts about what happened both back then and now.
Yeah.
And there was this one guy who did a bunch of research about this called Rick Ozuna, and he ended up having like a documentary he created. I couldn't find the rest of it, but I watched a portion of it and it was really informative. In it, 3 decades after this happened, he interviews Butch. Yeah.
Oh.
And like, not in like a weird glamorizing way, but just like, I don't know, just to talk to him, I guess. Yeah, it's wild. We'll go over that a little later.
Okay.
But Butch said that him and Bobby Kelsky, like back then when this was going on, he was saying that him and Bobby Kelsky went all around the house destroying the evidence after the crime, and that Bobby disposed of the evidence. Yeah. And side note, Bobby was also interrogated by the police, and allegedly he was beaten by the cops. The cops, however, stuck to their story and said that nobody ever got beat up there. And the Suffolk County Police has been known to be rather violent with questionable methods and tactics. So they also have one of the highest confession rates in the US and also a lot of brutality cases. So if they're known to beat the confessions out of people, it's very possible that that's what they did with Butch
that's what
and
happened.
Bobby. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and also Butch, like his personality, he was more of a follower. Kelsky was more of a leader. And so, I don't know, it's kind of wild. It's just a lot to think about, you know?
Yeah.
But the police wanted an open and shut case. And so their police work was questionable at best, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to go over is the police report, like the photo log. So Detective Summers, he walked around the house and his job was to go around and like take pictures of everything. And so he started on the 3rd floor. So from 9:17 to 9:30, all the picture he like in his log it shows I walked around on the 3rd floor, you know. And then at 9:32 he goes downstairs and starts taking pictures of the 2nd floor, like he's moving on, you know. And then at 9:40 he randomly goes back up to the 3rd floor in Butch's room, takes pictures of the gun boxes, and then goes back downstairs to the 2nd floor and resumes his pictures. Why did he go? Why? What? Why did he go back? Was he called up there by another detective? Did somebody plan something? The gun boxes, they were reported 5 days later after they knew about them. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. It's like, I don't know, it makes you think.
Yeah, it just feels like poor police work at best. Yeah. Meddling at worst.
Yeah.
Planting evidence at worst.
So Butch, he went through quite a few different lawyers, and the final one that ended up being like the last one was William Weber. When Weber came onto the case as his lawyer, that's when Judge Ernest Signorelli came in as well. And Signorelli ordered that all of the material from the prosecutor's office be shared with Weber. So like crime scene photos, like everything.
Okay.
And a funny little side note, Weber was on Signorelli's campaign committee.
Oh,
and so, once the prosecution found out, they were like, aren't you worried about a conflict of interest? And they were really loud about that. And so eventually Signorelli took himself off the case and recused himself.
Okay.
And yeah. When Ozuna was talking to Butch, he said that he was in Don's room when he tripped over the gun. And Ozuna was like, Butch doesn't seem super smart, like as a guy, as a person, you know? And so like that small detail of like tripping over the gun in Don's room, like it made him think that maybe Don did do it. Because like Butch, like he's not extremely smart, you know?
Oh.
Like, yeah, but that's just a little... So the prosecutor, his name was Gerard Sullivan, and he was lobbying hard. He was super invested in this case. He was so invested that he actually created another homicide squad unit, because initially Sullivan was like, somebody else was involved and I want to figure out who that was. And once Sullivan was able to kick Signorelli off the case, he was pretty much shopping around for a new judge. But Stark was the new judge. Okay. And from there, it was an uphill battle for the defense. And it took like a month for them to actually receive all the material that that Signorelli had said that they could have. So now that Weber, like after a month of waiting, Weber had the material, and he also hired Herman Race, a criminologist, like to help. And so Race started his own investigation. He started interviewing people and stuff.
Oh.
And this is what he deduced. He was like, there's no way that Butch acted alone. Race has since passed, but his son has all of his police reports, or not police reports, but just like his reports, his research reports. And they show that him and Weber would stay up countless nights trying to figure out what happened. And also one of the things that was in the report was that on Dawn's nightgown there was partially burnt gunpowder, like on the nightgown, which is weird because of the way that she was found in the bed. Like if she was shot while she was in bed, there would have been gunpowder on the duvet and stuff, but there wasn't. It was only on her nightgown. So it makes people think that maybe she was moved, or and then placed in bed kind of thing. Maybe. Because it's alleged that she wanted to move to Florida to get away from her abusive father. She was going to move there with her friend Beverly. And so
dang it.
Yeah.
That feels so unfair.
I know. And something weird about that is that her body, like all of the bodies except Dawn's, were found in full rigor mortis, and her body was the only one that was found in partial rigor mortis, indicating that she was the last to die by a significant amount of time compared to the rest of them. So that kind of makes you think that maybe she did kill them, and then after that they got in a fight, and then that's when Butch killed Dawn, maybe, I don't know though. I really don't know. And the only people that do know are the people that were there,
Yeah, exactly.
After the service of the DeFeo family, Father McNamara was invited to the house by a family friend, Gloria Gangitano. And Father McNamara said that when he went to the house, he saw signs of struggle. He saw prints on the wall. He saw it looked like somebody got up and struggled. He said that it was Dawn. He somehow knew that it was Dawn, and that she was the one that tried to get up and get away. People have since reached out to him multiple times to try to get him to confirm that, and he has never confirmed that.
What?
And he is now Monsignor McNamara. So he's moving up on the chain, but he can't be bothered to verify that statement, but alas.
Wow.
Yeah. And Weber had police issues of his own. So one day he was driving home and he was pulling into his cul-de-sac, Weber, Butch's lawyer. And two Suffolk County police officers pulled him over, and they were like, and they told him to get out of the car. And so he did. And they were like, oh, let me take your car because like I don't want you to disturb the flow of traffic. But it was in a cul-de-sac, and and so the cop grabs his car keys and takes the car and parks it, and like moves it and parks it. And he's like, oh, look what I found in his car. There's a gun in here.
No.
And so they straight up planted a gun, and they were like, let this be a lesson to you. And then when he was sent to court for having the gun, it was found that the gun that had been found in Weber's car had been receipted into the Suffolk County Police Department evidence 11 days prior. And so Weber, all of the charges were dropped, and he was acquitted.
Oh my gosh, that's wild.
Right? I was like, what the? Okay, now I'm going to introduce somebody that for years, like, you never heard about this person in this story.
Okay.
Her name is Geraldine DeFeo.
What?
And she was never previously mentioned in the story. So she contacted Ozuna, right? And she claimed to be Butch's wife.
What?
Yeah. And Ozuna was super sus. He was like, I don't know, girl. But Geraldine was like, I'm not interested in getting any money or anything. I only want to tell the truth. And so he began talking to her, and he interviewed her, and he spent a lot of time like asking her stuff. And he also was like, I'm gonna show her some of the crime scene photos and ask her things, because if she was his wife, then she would know things about the house, like little details. And so Geraldine is actually the one that brought up Allison. Allison was clutching her necklace, and it was a little heart, and it wasn't a cross, and that detail at the time was not readily available to the public.
Whoa.
And so that's kind of weird. And then Geraldine also knew about the song that Big Ronnie wrote, Louise, when he was and then so Ozuna ended up talking to her for like 50 hours and interviewing her, and eventually he was like, okay, I believe you. And at the time, and I don't know if I said this already, but Ozuna, he did a ton of research about the Amityville Horror. He compiled this website in 1999 where it was just so much information. And so at that time, a documentary reached out to him, and initially he was like, oh cool, like, this is a chance to like tell the story of what actually happened. Cool, I'm gonna be in it, And so he says, yes, okay. And then once he verifies like that Geraldine is who she says she is, he goes to the executive producer and he's like, you're not gonna believe this is absolutely crazy, nobody ever has known about this, let's put it in there. And the guy was like, yeah, you know, that's wild, but we want like a creepy Halloween special. It's set to air in Halloween like of 2000. We already wrapped up filming and there's no use in changing the story, so no. And
Okay.
so, yeah, and so Zuna was like, all right, that sucks. I don't want to be a part of your weird show anymore then. And so he leaves and he's like, I'm gonna do my own research. I'm gonna continue, you know, doing my own thing. And so
Good for him.
yeah. So he continues talking to Geraldine, and Geraldine is in the, like, in his documentary, much older, like, later. She's talking about everything. And she's telling the story of, like, when she was 23, she was in Greenwich, New York, and she was a musician, and she was playing at a bar. And Butch came in, and he was 17. I was like, side eye, Geraldine.
Ooh.
Or she was singing at a bar, and Ronnie, and some people called him Ronnie, but he liked to go by Butch, so you can either call him Ronnie or Butch. But yeah, he came in one night and he was being super disruptive, like he was just causing a ruckus. And he came in with friends and he was being all cocky and stuff, and he hit on her and she was just like, ew, no. And then he went away. And then another night she was performing and she had just finished like a set, and she went to go sit down and she sat on some flowers, some roses, and he had put him there for her. And so she was like, oh my god, that's so cute.
Ew, girl, no.
Yeah. And so she ended up falling for him.
No.
Yeah. She said that he was really charming and really like sweet with her. A lot of people knew about Big Ronnie because like they were a pretty like well-known family. They were well off. There was suspected ties to the mob, and I was like, I don't want to get all that into that, so I, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, so she knew about him, you know.
Yeah.
And so she was scared that Butch would end up like Big Ronnie, and so by that time when she was like scared, she was already in love with him. And she was just like, oh damn it,
Girl.
I know. And she was talking about how Butch was like, he was like a really well-liked person, but when he drank he was a different person. And then he started using drugs, and he became like really belligerent when he was drinking and stuff. So like, but despite everything, his now ex-wife Geraldine believed him, because according to her, he really loved the kids and he would never hurt them or his mom. So, and Geraldine said that she wanted Signorelli, the judge, because he was actually factual. And I was like, and if you can't tell, like, she is ride or die for Butch. Like, that is wild.
That's wild to me.
I was like,
Ooh.
yeah, I don't like that.
No.
So October 4th, 1975 comes by, and the trial happens 11 months after the crime, and the opening statements are made. And Sullivan walks the jury through Butch committing the crime. He theorized that Big Ronnie was shot in the back and then put back into the bed, but he never addressed how he thought that Butch put him back in the bed, being 100 pounds heavier, like dead weight, you know, like that's wild. And also Big Ronnie was found diagonal on the bed instead of like parallel, which is weird. It's like, did he fall that way? Was he put there? I don't know, you know. In the report it says that there was a stain found outside of the master bedroom. The prosecutor said that that's probably where the body was moved from, and Butch did say that the body was moved, so it's like, I don't know, maybe it did happen. And there was a detective named Jack Sherwell who drew diagrams of each bedroom, and they were really specific. Like he did like down to the measurement of each like item in the room. Like he did a very precise diagram. A passage from it said that there was a bloodstain found 36 inches off of the floor on a door frame of the master bedroom, and the passage is bracketed, and there's a written note on it that says omit, which I'm like, if that's true, what were they trying to hide? I couldn't find the report though. I was looking. The Suffolk County Police Department, their website is so outdated. It looks like it was done in 2001 and just never updated. I couldn't find this anywhere, but if that's true, like, that's wild.
What in the hell?
Yeah. So that happens, and then allegedly there's the inventory report was released, and it looks like they took 80 items total, and number 26 had a line through it and it said destroy. But again, there was no way for me to confirm that because I couldn't get my eyes on it.
What in the world?
Yeah.
It's like, were those records removed?
Were they removed, or... Yeah, I don't know.
That's so weird.
Yeah, it is weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this report, it indicated that the report took place after the initial investigation. So it's like, why were they looking for blood spatters in other parts of the house after the fact. Like,
Yeah.
why did they return? What actually happened? Why did they leave it just like that for them to be found? You know, like, are they dumb or what?
Yeah. What in the hell?
In the second hallway, there was a portrait of Mike Bergani with splatters of what maybe was blood. But the Suffolk police said that it wasn't blood, and then they proceeded to keep it in evidence for 4 years.
What?
So it's like, if it wasn't blood, then why wouldn't you...
What are you hiding?
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. Dr. Edelman, who at the time was like the medical examiner that would take the pictures of everything, he would use his own camera, like, every time at a crime scene, and then he would send the pictures over to, like, give the pictures over to the police department, you know?
So he could tamper with those photographs.
And that's where my mind went to initially when I heard about this, but that's not where we're going with this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he took those pictures and then he gave them over, and then he retired. And when he retired, he started doing lectures and teaching classes and stuff. And he asked the police department if they would give him the pictures just for him to be able to teach with them. And they were like, sure. They handed him over the pictures. Unbeknownst to them, they also handed him pictures that he didn't take.
What?
So yeah, they gave him his pictures back and then pictures that other people took. And
wow, okay.
Yeah. And so in those extra pictures that those cops gave him, there were 20 pictures showing woodwork in the house with dried blood. Yeah. Which indicates movement. It indicates that, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What in the hell?
And so I thought that was weird. And it was apparent that it was the DeFeo house because of the prominent, like, they had like red carpet, this really ugly red carpet, and blue and striped walls on the TV room. And so, like, you could tell that that's what it was, you know?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Dr. Edelman said that when he was there, he only saw blood on the bed and on the floor under the bed, but it could be because he was just focused on the body, like on the bodies, like he wasn't looking, you know,
for that. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. And there was also a dark red stain on the dresser, and they don't know if it was blood, but if it was blood, it would indicate movement. So and Sullivan was like, the motive was greed, but there was only $200,000 combined with both the estate and life insurance, so he didn't get much. And also the homicide detectives, they lied about this as well, because like so Detective Burleski, he said at the preliminary hearing, he got called up by Weber, and he said that Butch didn't even know how much money his family had, that it was the detectives that brought up the money thing in the first place.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. And Sullivan brought up a cash box that was found in the attic, and he was like, there was $100,000 found up there, and that's why he did it. But in reality, there was only like $500 up there. Okay. And also Big Ronnie would give Butch money like all the time. Like he would give him, because like they had a car dealership, like they were good, you know?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people say that money wasn't the motive, and Weber was like, it's not the motive. And so he brought people on the stand to testify to kind of like add to that point, you know? And people were saying, yeah, like there wasn't anything in the house that was of much value. Like they did have some stuff that was of value, but that was like kept in a safe at the bank, you know?
Yeah.
And so the judge pulls Weber over, and the prosecutor Sullivan, and he's like, what's the purpose of this? Like, why are you having me listen to this? And Weber was like, cause Sullivan says that the cause is greed, but it's not, and this is why.
Yeah, there's literally nothing to steal here. Like,
yeah,
what?
Exactly.
That's why I'm showing you this.
Yeah, and Judge Stark was like, this is a waste of my time. I don't care. I think it's irrelevant. And he threw it out.
What?
Yeah, but the jury didn't buy it. The jury was like, I don't think that's the motive either.
Oh, that's good at least.
Yeah. During the trial, Weber revisited the police brutality issue, and he put a detective on the stand, and he was like, so you said that you didn't see any bruises on Butch when he first came in, right? And he was like, yeah, that's right. And he was like, but 3 days after being taken into custody, a jailhouse worker reported Butch having getting a severe beating when he was brought in. And the detective was like, yeah, because he had an altercation with his father a few days prior. And he was like, so he had a few days prior, but there were no bruises during the investigation. But 3 days after the investigation, suddenly he was brutally beaten up from something that happened before.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm glad he called him out.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Weber was still losing the case.
Dang it.
Yeah, and so, which is like, I feel the same, but only because you know that they're messing with him, not because you want Butch to win.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, so at this point, he was losing it. So they were like, you know what? Our only thing that we can do now is to plead insanity. And so Weber called people to the stand to like kind of corroborate him being cuckoo.
Yeah.
And people told stories that were like, yeah, this man's a little cuckoo, but it wasn't like, it was like, this man is of sound mind.
It wasn't anything that supported that.
Yeah, exactly.
Enough.
It was just like odd, eccentric, but it wasn't like, oh my God. One of Sullivan's star witnesses was 9-year-old Johnny Donahue, who was a friend of John DeFeo. And his whole purpose was to corroborate that Butch and Big Ronnie got in a fight that night and they were punching each other. But Johnny Donahue, in a written statement, said that Big Ronnie slapped Butch and Butch didn't do anything back. And also, it was found later that where John was standing in the basement, there's no way he could have physically seen the altercation because of like where he was standing.
Oh.
And one of the jurors, who at the time was 25, shared some thoughts about the case and everything. Her name is Peggy Gambria, and she believed that Butch did get beat up by the police. And she said that Judge Stark came off really condescending and like prejudiced, and like just you could tell that he was like not on Weber's side, like just you know. And Sullivan was pompous, but Weber did manage to make a lot of good points. He caught Officer Robert Dunn in a lie about never being at the house because Detective Burlesky had to keep like a log of everybody that went in and out, and Robert Dunn signed his name in there, but said on the stand that he was never there, so he got caught in a lie.
That's wild. It's crazy. It feels like the cops, a lot of times, they just want to be, get it over with. Like, get the case over with. Just slap a guilty sticker on that guy and get him out of here. But it's like, it's like, come on, guys. I'm glad he caught him in a lie. That's funny.
I know. And also, another thing that he brought up was the alleged diagram that Butch drew. And because Melvin Berger, who was a police diver that found the murder weapon, said that the police were drawing the diagram as they were going to the diving location. And so Sullivan had to do some damage control at that point, and so he had Detective Burlesky. So he brought Detective Burlesky on the stand, and he was like, oh, that was a navigational marine chart. And so there was never a conclusion on who really did it. Butch said he didn't draw those. The police said they didn't draw those. And behind the house, there was like a body of water, and they were diving back there. So it's like, what were they looking for if they already found the weapon, Like,
yeah.
I don't know. And Dr. Adelman was called to the stand to testify about like the criminology and everything, and Sullivan was like, do you think that Butch did this alone? And he was like, absolutely not. And Sullivan immediately dropped the subject and moved on. And I wonder why, because initially Sullivan was saying that he had an accomplice, so I don't know why he changed it,
Yeah,
I'm not sure. But the trial continued, and Weber brought Bobby Kelsky on the stand. Bobby said that he was given a paraffin test and passed, but he couldn't remember the name of the detective that gave it to him, so the judge was like, it doesn't count because you don't remember the name of the detective.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
This sounds like the worst judge ever.
I know. And so as a last-ditch effort, they were going to try to plead insanity, and if they did go for it, he would get like 15-20 years in a mental health facility. And it was at this point that Butch's family, like his grandpa specifically, started questioning Weber and started disliking him. He was thinking that maybe he was only out for his own interests, and I'll tell you why he felt that way. We'll get into that later.
Okay.
But he didn't want Weber on anymore, and he was like, you should get a new lawyer, dude. But Butch was like, I don't want a new lawyer because he's too far deep into it. And he had gone through like a few lawyers. Like, he was not the first.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was like, it's too far into the trial to like get a new one,
Yeah.
And so that happened, and so Weber was like, all right, then you have to put on a show, like you have to like put on the insanity show. And so Butch did. So he was saying that he said that he could talk to God, that him and Dawn always talked about killing their parents and blah blah blah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and he just kept changing his story about what actually happened, like over and over. He kept changing his story.
Come on, that never looks good ever.
And after the closing arguments, they deliberated for 2 days and 2 nights, and then after that, on Thursday, December 4th, 1975, Ronald Butch DeFeo was sentenced to 6 life terms with no parole eligibility until 1999. The maximum sentence, that's what he got. He got the maximum sentence because there was no death penalty in New York.
Wow.
Yeah. So the DeFeo house is now up for sale. It's in probate court. It's way cheaper. And this is where George and Kathy Lutz come into the story.
Oh my God.
So these are newlyweds, and they purchased the house and they loved it. And it's important to note that although the house was way cheaper because it was like,
haunted AF, probably.
They still struggle. Yeah, exactly. They still struggled to purchase it. Like, they were struggling financially.
Oh, okay.
And so the story goes that they they move in, like they talk about what happened as a family, you know, the 2 parents and the 2 kids, and they decide that like they process it and they're like, you know what, we're gonna be able to make this house a home. And so all right, you know, so they decide to move in, and allegedly they were only there for 28 days before the experiences drove them out.
What?
Yeah, only 28 days. And
because it was haunted?
So their experience, or alleged experience, inspired 9 million movies. Inspired 9 motion pictures along with countless documentaries and books.
Whoa.
So, yeah. And George Lutz approached Ozuna during this time because he wanted to write another book, and so they became friends. Yeah, and they became friends and they started getting to know each other. But that all changed in the year 2000 because Ozuna came to the realization that Lutz was just in it for the money. Ooh. And so, yeah, so it was weird.
Okay.
So George and Kathy were newlyweds and they were into transcendental meditation. There are 2 very different accounts about what the Lutzes actually experienced, what they say happened, and what the rest of not the rest of the world, but I mean, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah, ultimately it's up to you. And so George Lutz, he calls Weber when the trial is still happening, and he was like, hey, I'm trying to buy the DeFeo house. I don't know why I did. My wife and I had a vision about it, and we can meditate and like feel the energy of the house, and like we just really want to like move here. And and Weber was like, okay, crazy, bye. He just kind of like disregarded him. And George kept calling Weber, so eventually he met with him, and George was like, this house is like for sure haunted. And we know that after meditating in there. And it's possible that the energy of the house is what made Butch act out that night. And what? Yeah. And the account, like when George talks about it, because I watched an interview with him too, it was like, oh, Kathy fell in love with the house. Like, we had no idea that it was haunted. Like, it was so beautiful. It was our dream house.
Fire.
Yeah. And George said that he had a priest come over and do like a blessing for the first couple of days that they were there, and that the priest was besieged with flies and that he heard a voice tell him to get out. He also claimed that he would wake up at 3:15 every morning, George, because that's when the murders happened.
What?
Yeah.
Why would they want to live there? I'm so confused.
I know. And apparently they didn't know about it before. I don't know. Maybe they did.
I know.
And he said that he started getting sick like shortly after moving into the house, and that him and Kathy would fight a lot, and that he like stopped taking care of like his personal hygiene, and he started becoming ruder, and he would always be outside chopping wood. And then Kathy was embraced by a ghost, and then they were worried about their daughter's behavior because she had an imaginary friend named Jody that would say things like, I'm so happy you're gonna live here for the rest of your life.
What? Oh my god.
The family doesn't like to talk about what happened the last night that they were there when they were driven out of their house.
What?
According to George, like his whole thing was that something was in the house that affected him, and he thought that the same thing affected Butch. So he was like, I want to conduct an investigation. And so he comes up with this idea where he wants to have like a paranormal investigation. And so he reaches out to Stephen Kaplan and his wife. They have like a couple of other people that work with them, and he was the only parapsychologist researcher in the area.
Okay.
Yeah, and typically they had teams of people who would be awake in the house from 6 to 2 and then 2 to 6, and they would take a ton of pictures, and they also had a magician on the team so that they would know like if it was a fib, you know, like he knew what to look for. Yeah,
that's wild.
Yeah, because he was like they were very, which I think is cool because it's like you want somebody on the team that would know if they're like,
if you're being played. Yeah, that's
exactly.
True.
And they advised the Kaplans that they do it free of charge, but they tell the public what they find. Like they'll always tell the public what they'll find, you know. And so George was like, okay, cool. Stephen Kaplan thought George was weird and suspicious from the get. He was asking him like a bunch of questions and thought that George had been like researching stuff like to say, you know, like he was interviewing him, and George was like talking about demons and stuff, and he was like, I think it's demons, and then he started naming a couple, and then he was like, oh, I don't want to like give him power, so I don't want to talk about it. But it's like there was no demon activity. There was nothing led it, like how did he come to that conclusion, like demons specifically, you know?
Yeah, it feels like he's just making it up.
Exactly. And so Kaplan announces that he's gonna do the upcoming investigation, announces it to like a local news thing.
Oh my god.
And George gets pissed, and he was like, I told you that I didn't want you to make a spectacle out of this. On the same day, George and Kathy Lutz had set up a press conference telling people that they were going to conduct an investigate or that they were going to write a book about their experience. So he was saying he didn't want any like public exposure, but he had a press conference. George was like, I want to cancel this investigation because I told you I wanted to keep it a secret. And Kaplan was like, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Later, this woman named Laura from a local news place, he reaches out. She like works with George and she's like, let me find you a new paranormal investigator. George is like, okay, let me find you a new investigator and then let us film it. And
okay.
Yeah. And so on March 6, 1976, Martin Scott, a news anchor from the local news, came to the house and he was going to spend the night with them along with two other paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, if you don't know who Ed and Lorraine Warren are, I'm sure we'll cover them at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll do a brief overview. Paranormal investigators involved in thousands of cases. The movie franchise The Conjuring was based off them, with the hot mom from Bates Motel. A lot of people think they're the real deal. A lot of people have questioned their credibility. I'm going to remain neutral. But yeah, so it's them. And the investigation was to be broadcasted, so it was like a big deal, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, and a lot of people say that this investigation was kind of like the domino that kind of put everything into effect from there.
Oh my gosh. Which probably inevitably jump-started the whole, like the satanic panic.
Oh, the satanic panic. I don't know when the satanic happened, but I'm sure
in the 70s,
it's like,
I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, this was in the 70s. Oh, yeah, so apparently George meets with them like in front of the house because he doesn't want to go in. And so it's Laura, the investigators, and the news crew. And George didn't want to go inside, so he leaves and they all head inside and they, you know, they set up shop. Martin gets there, and right when he gets there, they're about to do the seance, and he's like, okay, just this regular ass newscast, you know. And so he says the psychic Lorraine, she seemed like distressed and entranced, and everybody's sitting there, and he was like, my heart was racing because it was October and I was kind of spooked. And like, it's just funny because he's cute and he like didn't really believe in it, you know. But the news crew and everybody pulls out blankets and everybody's gonna sleep in the same room downstairs, which like, how cute is that, in the living room. And Ed and Lorraine are there and they're like in trances, and Lorraine was like, there's demons everywhere.
What?
It's like super intense. Yeah. And at 3 a.m., Marvin and Lorraine, they go up to the sewing room, which allegedly is the room that had like the most activity. Lorraine became hysterical and she started like talking to the spirits, and she quotes herself later saying, Martin, I hope this is as close to hell as I'll ever get. And Martin said that he was scared of Lorraine. He was like, I felt nothing but the chill of the night in that cold sewing room, darkened except for the flickering candle. I was like, I don't believe in this girl. And at 5 a.m., the police showed up, apparently responding to like a noise complaint that the neighbors filed. And so the crew left once they realized that dawn was coming up. When they were coming out of the house, Martin remembers that some of the neighbors were standing outside and they were saying, Ronnie, wanna come out and play, over and over. And he was like, that was so creepy. I still remember that 30 years later. Like, what the hell?
What?
Yeah.
Why would they say that?
I have no idea. Martin said he never saw a ghost that night. Apparently, the house was neutralized because the cameras were there. The crew heard and saw nothing, except for the cameraman who felt some heart palpitations as he was going up the stairs. But the crew was honestly just mostly concerned about when they would get their sandwiches. And according to George and the Warrens, that night went a lot differently. Per their accounts, when the group first got there, the people started acting odd, and the cameraman had a stabbing pain on the stairs, and Lorraine was sad, and
wow.
Yeah. And there was another not to like discredit people's, I feel like I'm saying it in a way where it's like, just pretend I said that in a more neutral tone, because it's like not to discredit people's experiences. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So but
they just had different experiences.
Yeah, they just had different experiences. Yeah.
Okay.
And so there was another psychic there, or not there at that night, but just there at some point, named Mary, and she said that she brought some holy water and she was spraying it on things, and things were sizzling because they were like demonic.
What?
And that she saw like the spirit of a little girl, and she told her to go to the light.
What?
And like, I don't know if I believe that, but again, I'm not gonna discredit somebody's.
That's wild though.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
That's wild. I guess that's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Like, it probably did happen, but that's wild.
Yeah. And Ed was walking around and felt like there was like a huge gust of wind that hit him, and he was thrust back aggressively. And Lorraine said that she could see bodies lined up, covered in white sheets, just like there, and she said that she could sense evil spirits that had been there for a long time, like before the family. That night there was a picture taken in the hallway stairs where there's a clear face of a young boy that shows up, and there's no children in the investigation that night.
What?
And the daughter allegedly saw the picture and was like, yeah, that's the kid that I play with. Which, like, yeah, right, bro. But, like, this is the picture. Allegedly.
That's creepy looking.
Yeah, that is creepy.
You think it's faked?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Objectively. So during the seance, Lorraine said that the original bed was there that belonged to Louise and Big Ronnie, and that she sat on it, and that, like, she basically relived Big Ronnie's experience there. Looking at the crime scene photos, it's obviously a very different bed. Like, it's a different bed, so physically that's not correct. But again, she could have had that spiritual experience in the house, you know? But as far as, like, the bed, it was a completely different bed.
Okay.
And it's important to know, as I would know, just kidding, there's no way I would know this, but like, and then like an actual like paranormal investigation, people say that it's really boring. People say that it's just like, a lot of like sitting around, a lot of history, stuff like that. And like, if you were to investigate something like the Amityville Horror House, that is like a lot of dark energy. So you would need multiple psychics, multiple investigations to make sure that you're being like legit.
Safe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Safe, and like also not just making stuff up, you know?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
is 24 hours in a house really objectively long enough for you to determine demon presence?
That's
just
fair.
a question to ask
That's a
yourself.
fair question.
Yeah. And maybe some would say yes. And I would say I have no idea because I don't know, you know? So the story comes out. The public goes nutso. It's a media circus. People are talking. Psychics have opinions. Skeptics have opinions. Everybody and their mother is talking about this. Like, it's nuts.
Oh my god.
And some say that the Lutzes orchestrated this from the get.
What?
Yeah. Not the murders, but like the paranormal, their
like
paranormal
the whole
stuff.
paranormal kind of story.
Yeah, exactly. In 1976, Paul Hoffman wrote an article called Our Dream House is Haunted, where it talked about like all this crazy stuff, like black and green slime oozing out of the walls, a pig with demon eyes haunting the daughter, keyholes like oozing out with slime, a window slamming down on a child's hands, and all of these things were never mentioned before. Like the reports before were just like, I think a ghost embraced me and we heard voices, but like nothing crazy like that, you know? At one point, Stephen Kaplan and George Lutz were in a public debate of some sort, and they were talking about the window slamming down on the child's hand. Apparently, it was like a ghost that did it or something. And Kaplan was like, "Okay, show me the doctor reports of when you took her to the doctor, and we can verify its legitimacy." Legitimacy. Yeah. And George was like, "Oh, we didn't take her to the hospital. We took care of it at home." Also, it was later found that the floorboards were uneven, so if you stepped on one, like at a certain angle, it would make it so that the window shut on the other side. You know how old houses are weird like that? Oh, yeah. Yeah. And at the same time, like,
what?
So, like,
if you stepped on the floorboard, it would make the door shut? The window shut?
Yeah. You know how, like, some old creaky houses do funny things like that?
No. Well, like, I know when we, like, have our windows open, our doors will slam. So that makes sense. Okay.
So from there, Jay Anson is put in charge of writing a book about the experience the Lutzes have. And he ended up writing the book called The Amityville Horror, A True Story, which became, like, crazy. We'll get into it. Jay was in charge of, writing the story of what happened to them. And he met up with George and Kathy, and he gathered all of the information. And he got a bunch of tapes of them talking about what happened. And from there, in 1997, the book was released, and the world ate it up. In the late 80s and early 90s, every year on Halloween, they would have to get, like, security at the house because people would just show up and want to rip off a piece of the house and get all crazy.
Oh my god.
Yeah. If you ask George Lutz, he'll tell you that Jay Anson's book is the closest thing that you'll get to the real thing of what happened. If you ask the majority of the people involved in the story, they'll tell you that it was complete make-believe. Or maybe not majority, but I would say majority. Nevertheless, we'll go over a few of the discrepancies because there were quite a few, to say the least.
Okay.
Father Ralph Pecoraro was a Lutz family friend, and per Jay Anson's book, he visited the house and gave them a blessing and what I assume probably a cleansing. And allegedly when he was there, he heard a voice saying, "Get out," and he was like besieged by flies. This never happened. And Father Pecoraro sued George Lutz and won. And yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. Side note, the story initially went that Lutz asked to meet Weber. Weber agreed, and then the Lutz came over and they drank a bunch of wine. They were talking about like the crime photos and stuff and their own experience at the house. And they were like, you know what, we should write a book about our experiences and blah blah blah. But Weber was like, let me go ahead and write a contract where we'll make money off of this, basically talking about movies and books that are actually based off of your experience at the house. And so they were like, okay. And they got super drunk. They had like 3 bottles of wine between the 3 of them. And the plan was that like they would all get a cut and that they would get rich, you know? Kaplan was like, why is Weber hanging around with George Lutz? Like, that's weird as hell. Which is weird as hell. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But George and Kathy, they wanted to write a book about their own experiences. And so that's when they sought out Tom Mawson, the editor of Prince Hall. And so Butch and Weber got played. They got $0 out of this whole thing. George and Kathy double-crossed everyone, and they were like, they fled to California, allegedly saying like, no, we're so scared and scarred that we have to move out. And so yeah, they skipped out on the deal that they had with Butch and Weber, which like, why would you make a deal with Butch to begin with? He's a bitter lass, you know, like. Yeah, and so that happened.
Wow.
Yeah, and Weber was pissed. He told the story in 1999 to Marvin Scott, the news anchor, because they were doing like a 30-year special of when the movie came out, and Marvin was reaching out to people that had initially been involved in the story to be a part of it.
Oh,
and
wow.
Weber confirmed that the book was bogus. He was like, this all started with a conversation between like me and the Lutzes, where we made up the whole thing, like the pig's glowing eyes and the slime, like all of it, like none of it's true, we just made it up. He also went to Kaplan and he was like, this whole thing was a hoax. Yeah, he was telling him how there was some fingerprint dust that was black and green left behind by the investigation, and that's where they got the idea for the green and black slime.
Wow.
Yeah. Weber then goes on Martin's show and reveals everything step by step. There was a cat that lived next door, a chunky cat called Evinrude. And
that's a cute name.
Yeah. And sometimes it looked like she had glowing green eyes or glowing red eyes. And Butch called her a fat pig. And so that's where the idea of the pig with the glowing eyes came. They made it up. And Weber wanted to share, so he was pissed. So he was telling everybody about this, and ultimately Weber and George ended up suing the crap out of each other.
Whoa.
Yeah. And initially, articles say that the Lutzes were only there for like 10 days. And then after that, it changed to 28. And it's impossible to like confirm when they actually moved in. And the neighbors say that in the windows, they could see a bunch of their stuff still packed in boxes and stuff. Like almost like they didn't have an intention of like really moving in, because their stuff was just packed the whole time.
Wow.
You know? Yeah. And they also didn't really have pictures of the family hung up, which like also makes you think that maybe they didn't want to be there for very long.
Yeah.
Because they were newlyweds. Like, why wouldn't they have a bunch of pictures up? Like, you know? So, that was weird.
Whoa, that is weird. It feels like...
Yeah.
Like they just saw it as a money-making opportunity.
Yeah. And according to the book, Jay's book, he spoke with Dr. Adelman. He never talked to Dr. Adelman. He never met him.
Wow.
And yeah, he was like, I met with him and he told me that the murder happened at 3 a.m. That never happened. He never met him. And Dr. Adelman said that the murders happened 24 to 48 hours ago, not at 3 a.m. There was no way to determine that.
Wow.
Yeah. And both in the movie and in the books, the demon blows up the front door. But what really happened was there was a bad like storm, and the like metal door got, you know, blown off its hinges. But the wood door was fine. Like nothing happened to it. And
wow.
Yeah. Jay Anson also pissed off Martin, the news anchor, lied about Martin's presence in the house, and he was off by a month. And Martin was like, he's a liar. It was cute. Martin's so cute. And when Jay was asked if he believed the story, he said, I'm a writer. That's what I do. That's all. Whether it's true or not, that's for people to decide. And he ended up making millions before he died of a heart attack. Yeah.
Wow.
And at the time, there was a huge divide between people that believed it and people that didn't. In the interview, Ozuna to Butch, he was like, that it was all a hoax to get money, wasn't it? And Butch was like, yeah, it was. The Lutzes were out to make money from the get. They knew Butch from before. Apparently, they all used to party together, and George used to get cocaine for Kathy.
Oh my god!
Yeah. Allegedly. And after the Lutzes moved out, the house was vacant for like 12 to 18 months before Jim and Barbara Sometry moved in, who were local residents. And they didn't think it was haunted. Like, the book also made you think that the house was left in shambles, and it absolutely wasn't. That they didn't have to do any renovations or anything. Like, the house was completely fine.
That's wild to me. I would not want to move in there.
Hell no.
Obviously, after the first incident, but considering the second too, it's like, come
Yeah.
on, why do you want to live there?
Even if you don't believe in it, like, exactly, why would you want to?
Yeah.
And Roger Nonowitz, he was a family friend. His wife used to clean their house. And he was like, he said that his wife would say that the house was so pretty. And it was just like really old and like pretty and quiet. But it never felt like haunted or evil or demonic. And she used to clean it. So that means that she was probably there alone a lot of the time.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
And why would she lie about that?
Exactly. And in 2012, Danny Lutz, George and Kathy's son, came out and was like, I want to tell the story about how this house actually was haunted. And people were like, I don't care about that, because in that 1980s, he tried saying that it was all a doozy.
Okay.
Yeah. And George proclaimed that he wishes that this was a hoax, that he wishes that it never happened, and he even cried about it in a magazine. He passed away in 2006. Before dying, he did state that he still stood by Jay Anson in the book he wrote, that it's more accurate than anything else that's ever been created about the house. He also sued MGM many times because of their inaccurate depiction of what happened. Died being 94% owner of the Amityville Horror Express LLC that had a hand in all of the movies and books that were ever made.
Whoa, that's wild.
Yeah. So
Made a whole company out of it.
yeah, straight up.
Wow.
So on May 27, 2012, Lorraine and George, they appeared on the Gentile show talking about the Amityville house. And I was like, the Lou Gentile show? What is this? What is this? So I went down a rabbit hole.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I found an interview with him, with Lou. And so I'll give you like a Sparks Note like version of it. But basically, he's this guy who's a paranormal investigator and a demonologist who's also covered over 1,000 cases and is like pretty respected in the community. He's like kind of a big shot, and he's thought to be like a credible researcher. Now, remember when I told you that there's a lot of opinions about the Amityville Horror House?
Yeah.
There are. Keep that in mind. He met Ed and Lorraine in 1997, and he met Ed when he was giving a lecture about the paranormal, and eventually he started working for them.
Oh my
And
gosh.
he sincerely believed that Ed was the real deal.
Whoa.
He said, he just loved ghosts. He's been investigating for more than 50 years. He would tell me stories about the things that he used to do, and it was almost like I was listening to what I would do when I was a kid, said Lou.
Whoa.
Lou had a show of his own, and there's a couple of quotes from Lorraine. She said, when they asked about the Amityville house, she said, when I started to walk up the stairs, it was as if you were walking against a waterfall, a force that was so strong. But never did I know that Ed wasn't behind me. But as a religious demonologist, Ed waited for the time when he could really be himself, to provoke in the name of Jesus Christ for what was there to reveal its identity. Then when it came time to go onto the third floor, my recollection of that third floor was almost erased from my mind. I don't know why, but it's almost erased from my mind. I really did not want to go up there. I know that there are haunted homes. I know that families can move out and other families can move in and nothing might ever happen, but not that house. I have to say, as I have said so many times before, that home affected our personal lives more than any case we ever worked on. It continued to follow us. It followed us right here to our own home.
Wow.
Wild,
That's a bold
right?
claim.
Huh?
That's a bold claim.
That's a bold claim.
Especially because didn't they work on like a bunch of other things?
Yeah. Lou said something interesting when he was being interviewed. When he was asked about the Amityville house, he said, well, here's how I got involved and what Ed told me. Ed was called in by George Lutz. Actually, Stephen Kaplan showed up on the doorstep of the house when the Lutzes began talking about it being haunted. He claimed to be a vampirologist or a demonologist, and any other thing in the paranormal world with an ologist after it. Stephen Kaplan was, from my understanding, a thorn in Ed and Lutz's side. He would make up things. He would constantly badger and try to get in the Amityville house. He showed up on on the doorstep and wanted to investigate, and was denied access from the home. From what I was told from George, he did little research and found out Kaplan was not who he claimed to be, that he had a goofy diploma and a phony doctorate because he'd gotten it from one of those diploma mills. George didn't like that. And Laura Video contacted George and told him that she knew 2 people who had been doing this kind of thing for years. And at the time, George acted like he didn't even know who Ed and Lorraine were, but it's very possible he did. How accurate Lorraine is, I don't know. I have been around her in many situations, and sometimes she can play off as, there's demons in here, and I don't know what to make of her. It's been reported in many of the New England haunted places that when she goes there, there's automatically demons in the house. Now, why that is, why a woman would make something like that up, I don't know. Maybe there's not, but it sure scares people, and they don't want them in. And Ed would say, "What are you doing? If there's demons in here, I would like to know." So Lorraine went in the house and said, "This is the closest to hell I would ever want to get." She was walking into the sewing room. Ed went down in the basement and was in the red room. Ed believed that there was something very dark and powerful in that house. He claimed that there were things going on inside in that house. Maybe there's not, but it sure scares people and they don't want them in. And Ed would say, "What are you doing? If there's demons in there, I think I would know." So Lorraine went into the house and said, "This is the closest to hell as I ever would get." Ed believed that there was something very dark and powerful in that house. He claimed that there were things going on inside that house, and things were going on with the Lutzes that had not been talked about. And then the interviewer is like, "They knew about the DeFeo murders when they bought the house, didn't they?" And Lou was like, "Yes, apparently from multiple sources, George Lutz knew about demonology and the occult and had prior knowledge of dark things before going into that house." And the guy was like, "Now, George and Kathy both admitted that they were both into transcendental meditation. It runs deeper than that, doesn't it?" And Lou was like, "Now, from what George said on my show, he and Kathy levitated, and that's on a polygraph. They were asked about levitating and they passed the polygraph. Now, did George and Kathy really levitate? And if so, how high? The only people who really know the answers are George and Kathy's deceased, so we don't know the answers and we can only go by what George said. A third party did not see them levitate, only the 2 of them saw each other. What went on in that house during those 28 days was the direct result of a family that purchased a home, and then at least one person knew about the death of the DeFeos, and that Ronnie had claimed to have heard voices, and that it was the perfect grounds for almost a playhouse. There's only one real Amityville Horror, and it was the murders of the DeFeo family. I think that with all the aspects of the case, all the elements are present in the story. Prior knowledge of the house's history, an unexplained death of a family, a tragic death of the family, and someone claiming to be possessed. And at the same time, you have someone who could have known that someone who had prior knowledge of the occult, someone trying to manifest something. It's the element of a disaster here. Nobody had a clue, but the Warrens had an idea, and they paved the way for future investigators.
Wow.
So, wow, right?
Yeah.
The book ended up selling 10 million copies. It was a very successful horror franchise worth $400 million. Butch and Weber never got a dime. Butch lost all of his appeals, and his grandfather, Mike Briganti, stayed by his side the entire time, and he was kind of a weirdo. He made Geraldine promise that she would stay by his side and keep in contact with him, and so she promised. What? And both of them are weird for that.
Yeah.
But Mike Burgundy, he really loved his daughter and he really loved the kids, and he was really heartbroken by what happened, and he would write Butch all the time to try to figure out what happened, to try to get him to tell the truth, and he never would. He would change his story a lot. And so God. Mike Burgundy died without knowing what actually happened to his daughter or to his grandkids, which is really sad. In the 1990s, Butch kept appealing, trying to prove that he had help that night. He finally came out with telling the world about Geraldine, and he was like, and she's so weird, but she was illegally adopted, and so she doesn't have a a birth certificate. And so he couldn't prove that she actually existed. And so he was like, she had a brother, and his name was Richard Raimondo, and that's who helped me with the murders. So basically he removed Bobby Kelsky from the story and added this Richard Raimondo into the story, And the police were looking for him frantically. They were looking at military records, school records, and they couldn't find him because he didn't exist.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and Geraldine was like, now this is where I draw the line. I'm not going to go with it. So he hoped for parole, but he was let down once again, and he died on March 12th, 2021 at 69, and the cause of death was never released.
Wow.
Yeah. And ultimately, here we see something that we've seen so many different times. It's people are murdered and people forget that, and it's people forget that these were kids that were loved. These were kids that had lives, and that's horrible. And through it, they made a whole franchise out of it. And so that's stupid. Yeah. And I don't know what really happened that night. I feel like it's impossible to know, but I'm sure you have your opinions, and I'd love to know what they are.
Yeah.
But I'm going to finish my makeup and we'll be right back.
Yeah. Nice job.
Thank you.
I'm somebody that I don't understand, and I just wanna know how you get up and fight it. All of this resentment for every missing moment. So this closer, I could fall down this rabbit hole of thoughts and things I don't need to know. I've been down there before.
All right, we're back.
Hey.
Hey.
Do you like
Good
our
job.
makeup? Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That was crazy scary, huh?
I feel like we've just learned another lesson on that the worst kind of monsters out there are human.
I think we're especially learning that right now.
Yeah.
If you like this, remember to subscribe and like this and share it and comment on it. And we'll see you in 2 weeks for next time's story where Celeste will be telling us something.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for being here. I love you.
Thanks for being here.